Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Please come in and take your seats. We are ready for the opening plenary of this year's Space Conference here in Aalborg, taking place under the Danish EU Presidency. This is where we will be bringing together European and Danish perspectives, political, industrial, and strategic, to explore where Europe is heading in space. We'll be looking at some of the biggest questions facing the European space sector right now. How do we strengthen Europe's resilience, sustainability, and competitiveness in space? And how do we make sure that Denmark, with its strong universities, industries, and innovative spirits, all represented here today, continues to play an active role in this European journey? We'll begin this afternoon with a welcome from the rector of Aalborg University, a keynote from Christina Egelund, Denmark's Minister for Higher Education and Science, followed by another keynote from Andrius Kubilius, who is the EU Commissioner for Defence and Space. And finally, a special opening address by Anders Fogh Rasmussen, former Prime Minister of Denmark and former Secretary General of NATO, who will set the stage for this session's panel that invites the Commissioner, the Minister, and the Director of Danish Industries, Defence and Security Industries, Mr. Joachim Finkelmann, to elaborate on the challenges and opportunities for EU's space sector. So, hopefully, these next hour and a half will give you all insights into the policy, the visions, and the innovations needed to shape Europe's future in space. Our first speaker this afternoon, Sorry, I am awake. Our first speaker this afternoon is Professor Per Michael Johansen, who is the rector of Aalborg University. Under his leadership, the university has become a major contributor to space research and innovation in Denmark and in Europe. So please welcome Professor Johansen.
Thank you very much, and a very good morning to you. Commissioner, ministers, industry leaders, entrepreneurs, policymakers, investors, researchers, and colleagues. Welcome to Space Conference 2025 here in Aalborg. Once, space technology was our gateway to distant planets. Now, our commitment in space is just as important for life here on Earth. Space technology is essential from communication to navigation, from security to innovation. It is our eyes, it is our ears, and our hands. And in time with escalating geopolitical and economic tensions, securing this technological foothold in space has never been more important. When President Kennedy made his famous address on the 12th of September 1962, where he pledged that the US would put a man on the moon before the end of the decade, his words echoed in a similarly divided world. And they still resonate to this day. We meet at a college noted for knowledge, he said, in a city noted for progress, in a state noted for strength, and we stand in need of all three, for we meet at an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. It is alarming that today we seem to meet in the exact same hour, decade, and age, and indeed in the same place. In a place of knowledge, progress, and strength. In the last 3 decades, Aalborg University has created an international research environment within space technology, and the university is home to some of Europe's most cited researchers in the field. Based on this strong research environment, Northern Jutland has become a hub for the Danish space industry and home to a cluster of some of Denmark's largest space companies. Employing over 1,000 people that are shaping the future of nanosatellite platforms, space communication, and constellation operations. Aalborg exemplifies how academic excellence and industrial innovation come together to advance both science and society. It was driven by exceptional researchers, by their devotion and entrepreneurship, but just as important, in their commitment in educating future generations. Earlier today, I had the privilege of attending the Youth Space Conference, and I was reminded of the fact that their curiosity, ambition, and commitment are exactly what we need to drive the next generation of space innovation in Europe and in Denmark. As a university, we have an obligation to the next generations, like the young people I met this morning, and an obligation to develop society and safeguard the structures of our democracy. This also means strengthening Denmark's and Europe's position in space. That is why we in the coming years will invest around 500 million kroner in a new facility, including a space tech center. An investment that will greatly boost our research, education, and innovation in space technology, electronics, drone technology, and robotics, and increase our ability to cooperate with the world around us. Because the reason President Kennedy's words still resonate today is not only because it was a great speech, but largely because the words were backed by investments. Investments in education, research, infrastructure, and industrial capabilities. And we need to make a similar pledge. We need to utilize the knowledge of the universities, invest in the progress and innovation of industry, and combine the strength of the EU and its member states to become our security, resilience, to increase our security, resilience, and competitiveness. And on that note, I give the floor to the Danish Minister for Higher Education and Science, Christina Egelund. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Per Michael, also for your commitment to space. Commissioner Per Michael, dear guests, it is a true pleasure to be here in Aalborg today. I spoke at my first space conference 3 years ago, and a lot has happened since then. Probably not because of something I said, but in just 3 years, space has become even more central. Not only as a field of scientific discovery, but also as a driver for business innovation and as a cornerstone in our defense and security strategies. This is, of course, underlined by everything that has happened in the world recently. The times that we live in are characterized by big changes and by disruption. A new world order demands new answers from Europe. For too long, we have been too dependent on our international partners, too used to relying on others to lead the way, to provide the technology, and to set the rules. Instead of building our own, instead of sharpening our own skills, instead of acting on our own terms. But this is changing. Europe is increasingly taking responsibility for our own safety, for our own development, for our critical technologies, for our own future. And space is a part of that picture. In fact, it is right in the center of it. When you look at the great turning points of history, the Industrial Revolution, the digital revolution, space has always been part of the foundation. A source of knowledge, navigation, communication, and today, more than ever, space is more than a field of exploration, it is the foundation for our lives here on Earth. From agriculture to aviation, from telecommunications to disaster response, the satellites orbiting far above our heads are as important as the infrastructure beneath our feet. We do not always see them, but without them, the world would come to a halt. That is why space activity is not a luxury, it is a necessity. And that is why I believe the coming decades of space science will change the face of global politics. They will shape the way we live, the way we work, the way we see ourselves as Europeans. Europe is at the very top of today's agenda here, but I want to start a little closer to home. Because all countries need to do their part if we are to build a strong and diverse space sector. So I was proud to announce earlier today that the Danish government has proposed a new strategic space program, and that we propose to increase our funding to ESA to 160 million euro, or 1.2 billion Danish kroner. This is an investment in critical infrastructure. It is an investment in our security, in our economy, and in our future place in Europe and in the world. We almost do our part, but no country can stand alone. Even Europe cannot stand alone in isolation. We live in a world where conflicts and crises do not respect national borders, and where our dependence on space has become both our strength, but also our vulnerability. That truth became very clear to me a little more than 1 month ago when I visited Ukraine. In Ukraine, satellites have provided critical communications and real-time images of troop movements, of damaged infrastructure, of humanitarian needs. Space has become part of the battlefield, and at the same time, part of the shield that protects civilians. The war in Ukraine is a reminder of how vulnerable we are if our security and our critical technology depend on others. If it depends on private corporations and on business magnates who do not always share our values or respect our democracies. This is about geopolitics. It is about strategic autonomy. It is about trust. It is about making sure that Europe can stand on its own 2 feet in a world where power is increasingly exercised through technology. Ukraine has reminded us all that the price of freedom and the courage it takes to defend it, of the sacrifices that people are willing to make when everything they believe in is at stake. The situation in Ukraine, the dependency on Starlink, the lessons we have learned the hard way, they all point to the same conclusion. Europe needs a strong, robust, innovative space sector on our own. We need satellites that we control, launch systems that we trust, companies that innovate, researchers that push boundaries, partnerships that are built on shared values. When we talk about building a green transition, when we talk about securing our energy supply, when we talk about protecting our democracies, none of this will succeed without space as a foundation. A thriving space sector is a basic prerequisite for European strategic autonomy. And strategic autonomy is not about isolation, it is about resilience. It's about ensuring that European citizens can rely on secure communication, that European companies have fair access to data, and that European democracies are not left vulnerable to technological pressure from Russia, from China, or from the United States. This is all very serious, and it can sound a bit bleak when we talk about Ukraine and the threat to our continent. But the good news is that we are well on our way. European space research and innovation play an absolutely central role in the development of critical infrastructure and in creating the technological solutions that we need. Many of you here today already play part in a growing European space sector, whether it be as a scientist, as a business owner, or a policymaker. And we need to keep going. We cannot afford to fall behind. The pace of development is spectacular. If Europe hesitates, we risk being reduced to an audience watching as others set the course. At the same time, we must choose our partners wisely, because space is about science, it is about security, about values, about who we are willing to entrust with the tools that will shape our future. That is why I welcome the prospect of an EU Space Act, a competitiveness fund that continues and expands the flagship components from the European Space Programme, and an industrial strategy for our space sector in Europe. They are an important foundation for the European space sector, and they send an important signal, a signal that Europe is ready to take responsibility. We are standing at the threshold of a third space age, an age where space is no longer reserved to a few superpowers. It is a shared frontier for all who dare to reach for it. I would like to end on a quote from the British physicist Stephen Hawking. He said, and I quote, "Remember to look up at the stars and not down at your feet." The future belongs to those who dare to lift their gaze, to those who believe that knowledge, innovation, and curiosity can carry us further than fear and hesitation ever will. So Europe needs to look up. Together, we can make sure that the next chapter of the space age is written in with our values, our vision, and based on our innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and what an excellent segue to our next speaker today, because she ended by saying Europe needs to look up. So let's turn our heads to Europe and to the EU Commissioner for Defence and Space, Andrius Kubilius. He brings valuable insights to Europe's strategic ambitions and the international collaboration in space. So please welcome Commissioner Kubilius to the stage.
Dear Rector, dear Minister, everyone here today, really I'm very happy to be here in Aalborg, in the House of Music. Music is very important for me, but when I go to a concert hall, I'm normally not on the stage. My wife is a violinist, so I have some other talents. I'm a physicist by training. So I know in space, no ear, no sounds. The only opera in space is space opera. In space, no one can hear you sing. And for some of us, like me, that is for the best. I confess my wife, she is prohibiting me to sing publicly. But seriously, I'm very happy to be here in Denmark. A Baltic neighbor and a European leader now has the presidency of the Council. Denmark is an European leader when it comes to defense. Denmark's strong defense posture is what we need in Europe in these dangerous times. And Denmark is also a proud spacefaring nation, with a space program going back to the 1960s, as old as the space age itself. I was very impressed by the launch of the Bifrost satellite in June this year, the first ever surveillance satellite to monitor Greenland and the Arctic. And it's exactly the kind of thing we need in Europe right now. Protecting Arctic waters protects not only Denmark, but protects the whole of Europe. Space is now on top of the European agenda. Earlier this year, the Commission made ambitious proposals. A vision for the European space economy with 40 actions to capture global growth. An EU Space Act to ensure a single market for space services. A true paradigm shift. And big money for space. A 5 times increase in our budget for defense and space for the next EU multi-annual budget. Up to 131 billion euros if member states will agree with our proposal. And most importantly, space is central to the roadmap on defense readiness we presented in Brussels last Thursday. The roadmap is a mega plan for delivery on defense with clear timetables, goals, and reporting obligations. I would call it a revolutionary strategy to achieve defense readiness by 2030. We need to be ready before 2030 because Putin will be ready to test NATO Article 5 at that time, as our intelligence services are saying. And without space, here will be no defense readiness. Russia uses space to invade, to terrorize, and to kill. We must use space to defend ourselves and deter aggression. In the roadmap, we propose to build the European Space Shield, one of 4 pan-European flagship projects. Projects that no member state alone can build and that will protect all of Europe. Built with member states, supported by European Union. The European Space Shield will build on national capacities and on our European flagships, like Galileo, like Copernicus, like IRIS², which we are building now. We will launch it in the summer of next year. Also, we are planning to launch new systems which we urgently need, like the Earth Observation Governmental Service for Geointelligence. Goal of the Space Shield is defense of space and space for defense. Protect our space assets and use space assets for defense. In Ukraine, satellites guide Russian bombs and rockets to cause destruction. But satellites also help Ukraine to communicate, to operate drones, to defend their freedom. Space is not only decisive on the battlefield. Space is also becoming the next battlefield. Russia is developing powerful laser weapons that can permanently blind satellites. German satellites are being shadowed by Russian spy satellites that could damage or destroy them. We are already under attack. Jamming and spoofing of global satellite navigation systems. 50,000 flights affected in 1 year, here on the European continent. And in the Baltic region, a 5 times increase compared to last year of radio frequency interference. In our defense readiness roadmap, we deal with the threats to our satellites. With stronger space situational awareness and space domain awareness to monitor threats, and by developing in-space operations and services to repair, refuel, restore damaged satellites. Our soldiers need 3 things: secure observation, secure navigation, and secure communication. And we are making sure they get it through space. Before the end of this year, our secure European Union satellite communication program, Govsatcom, will start services. And that means that all member states will share the benefits of secure, military-grade communication. In the long run, IRIS² will bring secure satellite communications to all corners of Europe and the world. And I remain fully committed to accelerating the deployment of IRIS². We are currently working intensively with all partners to make this a reality. And for positioning, navigation, and timing, we are working on a new low Earth orbit positioning, navigation, and timing component of Galileo, the LEO PNT. And later this year, we shall fire up Galileo Public Regulated Service, an encrypted and secure service to protect against spoofing and jamming, and giving our soldiers a system they can rely on that is robust, autonomous, and European system. As our defense readiness roadmap makes clear, sending an encrypted signal is not enough. New receivers in our military planes, ships, vehicles will be essential. For observation, we intend to set up an Earth observation governmental service, space-based geo-intelligence adapted for the military and for civil security use, allowing surveillance in rain or shine, night and day. It will be an absolute game changer for our soldiers in the field. With secure and fast access to data essential in times of crisis and war, with high resolution, capable of identifying the exact model of the tank on the ground, or even the specific person, with higher satellite revisit times, essential to monitor military activity and to support military action and exercises. The Commission has been working intensively to define the scope of such a new capacity. The 2 feasibility studies we commissioned have been completed. Pilot studies are being carried out by the EU Satellite Center. We are discussing the exact parameters with Member States. As I announced already before the summer break, we aim at consolidating the user requirements by November this year. We are also working on security requirements which we aim at consolidating early next year. We are working on a clear political mandate agreed with Member States. And building on this work and more, we will make the Earth Observation Governmental Service a reality from 2028 onward, so in the next European budgetary period. But this is not all we need to do. We must ramp up our access to space. Access to space is mission critical for our future in space. Europe has regained strategic capabilities with the 2 European launches, Ariane 6 and Vega C. Just this summer we could celebrate 2 successful launches. But we need to do much more. The 21st century is a century of space. We are at the start of a space revolution. I want us to benefit in full from that space revolution. We cannot afford to leave space to Europe's enemies. And we cannot afford ourselves to fall behind our friends. But then, we need to launch many more satellites, many more rockets and better rockets, returning rockets that we can use again and again and again. In this house of music, I will end on just one final note. Your work on space and in space is very inspiring. It is what children dream of, what they want to do when they grow up. And space can also inspire our work on defense. In defense, there are very few successful projects involving several member states, at least at the moment. But for space, we have worked with Commission, member states, European Space Agency, and EUSPA. And we have built our space flagships, like Galileo, like Copernicus, and now IRIS². Colossal projects benefiting an entire continent, and that no single member state could have ever achieved on their own. That is how we move forward in Europe, together, united. I hope that our success in space, collective achievements, will inspire member states to seek the same in defense for collective projects and collective achievements. I want you to know, you do a very important job, and I wish you a lot of success. The future belongs to space, and who controls space controls the future. So our future and our security is in your hands. Europe needs you, Danish engineers, students, academics, companies, to be ambitious. Remember that in space, the sky is never the limit. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And the Commissioner and the Minister will return to the stage in just a few moments for this session's panel. But before we invite them back, we have invited a very special guest to set the stage for the conversation that we're just about to have. He really needs very little introduction. As Denmark's former Prime Minister and the former Secretary General of NATO, Anders Fogh Rasmussen has shaped both national and global security for decades. Today, he's a leading voice on Europe's future and international cooperation. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Anders Fogh Rasmussen.
Minister Egelund, Commissioner Kubilius, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the chance to join you today. It has been 56 years since man stepped foot on the moon at the height of the Cold War and captured the imagination of the world. Yet, for too long, Europe's ambition in space has lagged behind. But I'm glad that with my friend Commissioner Kubilius, our first space commissioner, that is finally beginning to change. And that's important because investments in space are no longer simply about exploration and imagination. Today, space is essential to European security. But Europe faces three fundamental challenges that are threatening our access to space. First, we are being challenged from a technological standpoint. We lack competitive launchers. Second, we are being challenged by companies like SpaceX, which are consuming scarce orbital resources. And third, we face a massive investment gap. Figures are alarming. Europe's per capita space spending is 8 times less than the United States and half of Japan. In the private sector, we are lagging far, far behind the United States. Our private sector investment is 1/4 that of America's. Our startups are being starved of funding, and Elon Musk is crowding us out of low Earth orbit. Let me be clear, this is a problem. Yet, despite these very real problems, I remain optimist because, as Churchill said, it's no use being anything else. But also because Europe, including Denmark, have formidable strengths to build upon. Galileo provides world-class satellite navigation. Copernicus provides the world's most comprehensive Earth observation data. The European space sector employs over 60,000 skilled workers, and it generates more than 78 billion euros of value to the wider global economy. We have world-class institutions, and we are home to some of the world's best researchers. Our challenge now is to capitalize on Europe's advantages. And I see 3 immediate priorities. First, we need more money. And in that respect, I would like to congratulate you and commend you, Minister Egelund, for the decision to increase the Danish contribution to the European Space Agency and developing a new space strategy. And we need to break Europe's taboo on defense investment. And the inclusion of a space shield in Defense Readiness 2030 is a welcome step, and I would like to commend Commissioner Kubilius on that. Space, like drones or artificial intelligence, is dual use. It is also expensive. In the United States, defense accounts for roughly 60% of space spending. If we are to develop our space capabilities, we need to tap into our defense and security budgets. The EU and the European Space Agency are making important progress, but together we must move faster. Denmark and the Nordics can lead the way. We should create a joint Nordic satellite constellation for surveillance and secure communications. Doing so would spread costs, strengthen our collective defense, and boost our regional space industries at a moment when we are on the geopolitical front lines. And it could serve as a pillar of the space shield proposed in Defense Readiness 2030. We have the companies like GomSpace here in Aalborg and others, and we have the expertise. What we need now is the will. Now, second, we must cut through the bureaucracy and political infighting. Basically, I would say space should be an EU competence. To be very honest about it, all the 27 EU countries are too small to handle space on their own. Even Germany, even France. They cannot make any significant difference on their own. Space has become a geopolitical scale game. The United States, China, India, and private mega constellations are dominating the space field. To achieve sufficient scale, strengthening our bargaining power and our international voice, avoid duplication, to achieve all that, we should hand over national competences to the European Union. Well, now I know that I'm stirring up a hornet's nest. So let's focus on a pragmatic way forward. We should hand over more competence to the European Commission to set the rules and the standards. We should keep and strengthen the European Space Agency as the builder, and we should preserve national sovereign assets and not open that part of the game. If we spend more money on the same things that our neighbors are spending it on, we'll end up weaker results at higher costs. And then third, the EU Space Act should become the standard for space regulation. We unfortunately live in a world where multilateral agreements at places like the United Nations are nearly impossible. And the rules governing the use of space date back to the early days of the Cold War. But when it comes to the safety and sustainability of our orbits, time is of the essence. And with a small number of private companies driving the overcrowding of our orbits and the overconsumption of spectrum, relying on the goodwill of American billionaires is not a strategy. Doing so would mean more space debris, more service disruption, and an unacceptable loss of sovereignty in space. The EU Space Act can lead the way to set new rules and ensure space remains accessible to us all. And I very much hope that Denmark can use its Council presidency to push this forward. In recent years, we here in Denmark have not given space the attention it deserves. But let me be clear, Denmark is home to many of Europe's leading space companies, and many of them are here today. And it is essential that they be able to live up to their full potential. If we get the Space Act right, I know they can. Ladies and gentlemen, just as we must increase our defense spending on Earth, we must rapidly increase our investments in space. We must develop the technologies we need to defend Europe's sovereignty, working with partners who share our values. We must create more opportunities for Europe's brightest minds to enhance our security and create greater prosperity for us all. Putin's invasion of Ukraine has reminded us that we must never take our security for granted, and that we must never again be reliant on those who do not share our values, be they erratic Russian autocrats or erratic American billionaires. We must be able to act independently in space, just as we must on land, in the air, and at sea. But if we fail to act, and act decisively, we will be left behind, as our friends and adversaries lay claim to outer space. We cannot let that happen. As Kennedy once said of America's moonshot, we do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. I hope that Europe can harness that same spirit. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rasmussen, for setting the stage for the conversation that we will be having now. And let me invite back to the stage the Commissioner, Commissioner Kubilius, Minister Egelund, and also Joachim Finkelmann, Director at the Confederation of Danish Industry for Defense and Security Industries. Please come join me on stage. They would love an applause to feel welcome. Yes, thank you.
Well.
And also let me remind you that you can ask your questions to this audience by using Slido. I believe there is a QR code coming on the screen, so you just use your camera, you grab the QR code, and you can type your question for this panel, and I will have it here on my iPad. Welcome, all three of you. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. Mr. Finkelmann, your first time on stage today, so glad to see you. Let me begin with you, since you have not spoken yet. You heard Mr. Rasmussen, Rasmussen lay out sort of three challenges and three perspectives. He talked about a lack of competitive launches, about companies, private companies, particularly SpaceX, consuming large orbital resources, and a massive investment gap. Do you agree that these are the main challenges?
Well, the short answer is yes. But if I could elaborate, of course, I think coming together in EU on this agenda is extremely important, and I think the Minister and the Commissioner very well laid out both the challenges and the needs for us to do things together. when we look at things like European competitiveness, it's no doubt that we are behind the curve as is. So talking about removing obstacles, investing heavily in technology, in research, and of course building an opportunity for businesses to grow in this field is extremely important. It's not just about a growth adventure, it's about security, it's about resilience. So I do agree with the main facts from Mr. Fogh.
And this is, Commissioner, also summed up in Fogh Rasmussen's speech as we need more money. Is it? Do you agree that even more money is needed?
Of course, always more money is not bad. But, you know, definitely we need to also be realistic. All the money are coming from taxpayers. There is no, you know, EU money. Miraculous, you know, we do not have money tree to, you know, to bring some kind of super money. The same with national money and private money. So what we can look for, definitely, we can look for additional possibilities how to invest. For example, now Commission is working on Savings and Investment Union, which according to the famous letter report could open for us possibilities to use 33 trillion European money, which we are not using. Because we were not able to create a proper, you know, conditions for investment of those money. Those money usually are invested into some American, you know, funds, and then those money through American funds are coming back to Europe. Americans are buying our startups, and so on and so on. So I'm just telling you some example, what we need to do, what we are planning to do, and I hope that that can open some kind of new possibilities. But second, really also what is very much important for us as Europeans to see the future of space. And what Mr. Rasmussen have said, you know, in a very proper way, you know, space is becoming something very big for 21st century, and you know, and sometimes it looks for me that still we do not catching, you know, this perspective, and then we are slow in development, slow in investing into that, you know, very big perspective, which, you know, we need to understand. If we shall not start to invest now, in 10 years' time, we shall be late in development of lunar exploration, of, you know, of in-space operations, which will become, you know, even manufacturing in space. So that is what we need to grasp, this, you know, perspective, which can come in 10 or 15 years' time, and where we need to start to invest now in order not to be late in those developments.
Mm-hmm. And Minister, if we talk about development, more research, more funding, more investments, there's a question from the audience about the balance between the public initiatives and the private initiatives. Obviously, Mr. Finkelman is here to represent the businesses, but how do you see that balance?
Well, first of all, you know, the partnership between public and private investments here is crucial. In this country, every time we have succeeded in creating a real national stronghold, take for example the life sciences industry, I think it's the best example we know, is created exactly on public and private partnerships. So government, universities, industry, private foundations also invest in the commitment. So the balance there is crucial. And I think it's fair to say that in order for us to hope to attract more private investment into the space sector, it's also fair to have the expectation from your government that we also show a true commitment, and not only for a year investment, but for a longer term commitment from our side. So this is why I have last year presented a 10-year strategy for the Danish space sector, both for the scientific research, but also for innovation and industry. And today we then announced that we're actually increasing our investment within that framework and adding to our contribution to ESA, is exactly to show that the government is ready. We are committed. We have understood the necessity of investing in space technologies and why they are so important to European competitiveness and also now increasingly to our security. So yes, absolutely, we need also more private money coming from the private sector. But I think it's only fair that in order to create that ecosystem, it's also fair that the government actually, put our hand on the cooking stove first and say that we are also committed and we also invest real and long-term money.
And that is what you are saying that you are now doing, and you're also increasing. Is that enough? Is that what will make this happen?
First of all, I need to congratulate the minister and the government for this increase in investments. It is a very welcome initiative. I can say we've waited for some time for this increase. We have a space sector in Denmark where I believe we have the whole ecosystem in Denmark as such, but still, from a business point of view, we see a fragmented world where we lack that clear ambition that will make companies come together and put investment forward in a program, for instance, to ensure the surveillance, the communication, and so on in Denmark for security reasons. So we have had several strategies talking about the importance of space, but we didn't have the political push to make companies come together to find also the private investments to bring the businesses forward. In my view, one good place to start is creating a space agency. Not often do we in industry talk about the need for new structures, but in this case, we do believe that the space field being taken care of in Ministry of Climate, in Ministry of Business, in Ministry of Defense, in Ministry of Higher Education and Science, of course, it provides, in our view, perhaps a little bit of an overload on the research side and a little bit less attention on the actual business opportunities. So bringing this together, we even have our own astronaut. Why not? We are a space nation. Why not have a space agency? Bring those parties together. Everything in space is dual use. There's no doubt that it will work in different sectors. I do believe it's a win-win situation.
Minister, is that a good idea?
But I think I know that Danish industries have been suggesting for a long time that we have a national space agency in Denmark. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think we have not been mature enough yet to actually have the necessity for that. Maybe the day that will be, absolutely necessary, I think will be a fantastic day, because it means that we will be in a different place than where we are now. So hopefully we will agree on this sometimes in the future. But I think it's also important that of course, we build a strong Danish space sector here, but that we not with that also becomes protectionist. I think that's extremely important, but that we see ourselves as part of the European ecosystem. As our former Prime Minister said, no European country, we are a small country, no European country is able to compete globally here, and we all know the global players, the United States, of course, China, India, big companies, led by billionaires who not always share our democratic values. So it's so important that, yes, we build a stronger space sector in Denmark, but we do it with open eyes and with European hearts in mind, that we see ourselves as an integrated and positive player in what is being built up now in Europe. I think that's extremely important.
And I was going to ask you the same, Commissioner. Would you necessarily wish for national space agencies in all the countries and then having to make them work together?
Well, perhaps I will not be able to answer, very specifically. I don't know Danish situation, but definitely, national institutional arrangements are very much needed. But they are not contradicting strengthening of European capabilities to develop European policies. And that is what we are doing with European Space Act. We need to avoid fragmentation of European space policy into 27 national space policies. That is what the famous Draghi report is warning us. Don't repeat the same. What we have, the biggest problem in defense is that defense industry is totally fragmented because defense policies are quite fragmented. That is historical heritage from 1950s when attempts to create European defense community failed. Then, defense policy became policy, national policy, national sovereignty, and so on. And that created then all the fragmented industry. So in order not to repeat the same in space, we need to look how we can overcome this fragmentation. That is why we're coming with the space law. Because when we have fragmented policies, our companies are not able to use the size of single market in order to build their competitiveness. And then we are starting to lose to global competitors. So that is very much interrelated.
There are lots of questions from the audience coming into you, and I see two main subjects right now. I haven't organized them completely yet, but two main subjects. One is to do with the EU Space Act, as you mentioned, another one to do with defense, but let's go with the Space Act first. So a question from the audience is, when would that be a success, and what should be in it?
Well, everything what the European Commission is doing is a success.
Per definition. I'm glad we got that straight.
That's for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's answered then. That's fixed.
But really, if you look more seriously, what we need to do, and I said, one thing is really to avoid fragmentation. Another thing is, I'm sometimes comparing developments in space with how things were developing, for example, at the beginning of 20th century, with automobile industry or with planes, airplanes. At the beginning, when there were few automobiles, so there was no need for rules of the road. But when the roads became overcrowded, definitely, everybody understood that we need to bring some kind of rules of the road. The same is starting to happen with space. One thing that we can, we cannot allow ourselves to have, fragmented rules, and in such a way to destroy a single market, and to create, big problems, obstacles, bureaucratic obstacles for business who wants to expand into the whole European market. From another side, we need to see how exponentially number of satellites is increasing, and what I call, space revolution is coming. So we need to bring rules of the road. That's one thing which is major, purpose of this Space Act. Then definitely, we need to look into sustainability. How to have some rules also, how not to, not to have problems on the space roads with all the trash and so on and so on. And second, last point is on resilience. How to build, our capabilities which be, resilient from whatever, jamming and so on. And that is the whole purpose of this Space Act. Mm-hmm. And I hope that, really we shall move forward. Of course, there are discussions how not to create additional bureaucratic, complicated structures. I am always saying that now Commission is very much keen to do, in different areas, omnibus on simplification. It will be good for us not to create now, too complicated system on space and then to go into simplification. But sometimes it happens, that first of all we are creating something and then we are looking how to simplify. I hope that this will not be, this will not be the case with SpaceX.
Creating something simple.
Yeah, but does this sound good in the ears of the industry, or are you worried about even more regulation, even more bureaucracy?
Well, EU's answer on removing barriers is always to introduce new regulation. You need new regulation in order to make things more simple. And I think that in itself is, of course, a challenge. I do believe that what we have seen over the last year, especially on the defense agenda, that the ability of the Commission and the EU system to act fast, because the situation requires so, has been very eminent. What we haven't achieved a common understanding of yet is that this also goes for space. That space is an integral part of our security not just on papers and in strategies, but as we sit here and watch what's going on in Ukraine. So the urgency that we see in other fields, on defense for instance, we need that urgency on space as well. It is coming, but it is crucial that we do remove barriers, that we do consolidate. And in my view, consolidation is also about political ambitions. You need strong political decisions in order for industry to come together and make it more attractive to come together and invest rather than doing it by ourselves, basically.
Yeah, understand.
But just a little remark on the EU Space Act. I support the Commission's work on establishing a common law on space and regulating space in Europe. I think for many different reasons. One, ideally, we would have a universal global law that regulate activities in space. I think in the current geopolitical situation that is not going to happen. We don't have a universal regulation of activities in space. So why not starting by setting European standards to it? Why should we wait for the others to set their standards and then we try to regulate what the others are doing? And now we actually have an opportunity to write the first piece of paper written by in the European spirit and on European values on such important matters as safety and sustainability. So I think that's extremely important. Then, of course, from a business point of view, it's extremely important that it will not just be a new burdenful wall of bureaucracy for small companies, but actually create a level playing field also for European SMEs. So I think there's a lot of good things can actually come out of this regulation too. And I think it's a unique opportunity for Europe actually to go first.
As I mentioned, there are quite a lot of questions coming in concerning defense, and we've talked quite a bit about defense and how space and defense will interact and will have to be two sides of the same coin, so to speak. But there is a question that's been getting a lot of votes from the audience here, and that is, with all the focus on security and defense, people would like to hear the panel's thoughts on space science potentially being overlooked in this new area. That we're looking so much for defense that we risk overlooking space science. Commissioner, what's your thought on that?
Well, science always is crucial and important. I came into politics from science, and I am very happy with my experience. And definitely, in some way, what we can do, we have European Defence Fund with, where we're investing into research and development of specific products, specific, important systems. And since space is very much related with defense, that is also covers some space investigation, space research. But definitely, all other European programs like Horizon are very much, also devoted to development of space research. And we can look, simply how to strengthen that. I cannot maybe elaborate too much about policy in research, since this is not directly my responsibility. But definitely, both defense and space in those new times, as we can see, even from experience in Ukraine, demands a lot of innovation, a lot of new technologies, artificial intelligence, quantum technologies. Those are things which are really disruptive technologies which are changing a lot, and they will change a lot. So we need to be ready for that. At least what I hear from experts, we as Europeans were really quite good in terms of research, in finding new ways how to use new technologies. Where we are lagging behind is, of course, in development and in industrialization of our research results. So we need to close this gap. But that's another story. We are We do not have such a attitude to risk, accepting risk, in development of new products. That is why we sometimes are lagging behind some other nations.
But as someone remarks in the audience, scientists are sometimes reluctant to engage in war-related research. So should Danish universities participate in defense, or should it be carried out in specialized institutions?
Well, I think, first of all, each individual scientist, of course, always will have the freedom not to want to participate in a research program that supports defense purposes. I think, from the government point of view, having that, excluding military defense use from our research program is just a luxury that we can no longer afford in the situation in which we are. So of course, each scientist, would always have, we're a free country, will always have a freedom to say, I don't want to work for this and that purpose. That is totally fair. But excluding defense purpose from our publicly funded research activities is just a luxury that we, unfortunately cannot afford anymore. But and when it comes to space science, one purpose does not necessarily exclude the other. So it's taken from satellite activities, for example. So the same technology can be used for defense purpose, for surveillance with the defense purpose in mind, but also for improving a more sustainable use of the planet's resources, for example.
Mm-hmm. And Finkelman, do you agree that there can be a challenge with that the basic science could be overlooked because we are looking too much to defense?
I too don't see a contradiction there. I would argue the opposite, that for many years we've perhaps focused too much on the science part and too little on the business and security. But the dual-use nature, as the minister said, is just it's a benefit for all of us and simply something that we cannot disregard at this stage. I do want to say that the conversion, as the commissioner mentioned, of science and technology into actual solutions, the rate of conversion, I call it the speed of relevance, is something that we need to introduce also in the space domain, the ability to convert technology into usable solutions very fast. And I think there's a challenge for the scientific community to reshape the mindset and to work more focused on getting solutions fielded very quickly.
Change of subject. Question for the Commissioner. Do you agree that the current European launcher situation seems unambitious?
It's improving. It's improving. Let's be optimistic.
So it's improving from a situation where it was unambitious.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you know that we had some years quite difficult when we were not able to launch at all. And now it's improving. We are coming back, but definitely we are staying quite behind SpaceX and things like that. We need to recognize. But we shall catch up, and we have good, ambitious plans with European Space Agency. What we need to do, how we need to bring back our launching capabilities, really to adapt to new technologies. What experts are recognizing that some decisions, technological decisions made back in 2014, put us, on let's say, on this difficult situations that we were not catching at that moment, some new technological developments. So we are coming back, and again I'm repeating that what is important for me, from my point of view, is not just to speak about launching like something which is it's nice to have. It cannot be so that we are behind Elon Musk and this is the reason why we need to catch up. It would be in some way not sufficient approach. We need to see really what will happen in space during next 10 or 20 years, and that simply we shall need to have good transportation system in order to be part of those revolutionary developments in space. Lunar exploration, in space operations, manufacturing, and so on. That will demand really to have good transport.
So what should the level of ambition be, that we don't need SpaceX at all, or that we don't need other launches at all, that Europe can take care of all the launching taking place here?
No. We need to look really into much more rapid development. Now we are looking how really to serve what we can call, public demand with those launches which we have. But even when we are looking into Ariane capabilities and Vega C capabilities, we can foresee that quite soon we shall have issue of shortage of launching capabilities, just for public, for European projects. So and that will bring to us some big question marks. Should we develop and should we expand launching capabilities in Kourou? Should we look for new capabilities in some European member states? I don't know about Danish vision, but we have Sweden, we have let's say European continent countries like Great Britain, like Norway, who are developing their own launching pad capabilities. That's what we shall need to have. Also, besides those heavy launches, it looks like that there will be a lot of possibilities for what we can call micro launches, which are launching very rapidly, small pieces, but very dynamically. And especially if you see some problems in space and you need to have in space operation, you cannot wait when big launcher will bring you service to launch your satellite or whatever into space. So a lot of new demand and new capabilities will come, and that is why we are looking also in space into what we can call how to aggregate the demand, and then really to have much more clear perspective what we should expect from the industries, what kind of launching capabilities we need to have looking into the future.
Is this a business opportunity, Joachim?
Well, yes, of course it is. I do believe that having European capabilities in this area as well is needed. I also believe that not every nation should run around and spend all its resources on building this capacity. So we need to make it more attractive to go European in such a strategic field. It's not different from military capabilities in NATO, strategic transport, missile defense, things that are more expensive than any nation can handle by its own. Make it more attractive to go European, and that's the way to find solutions.
Then there's a question about the competition between Europe and some of the other countries that we normally in this field compare ourselves to, the US mainly. And a question about how you envision that EU startups can achieve the same level of innovation, competitiveness, and economic growth as those in the US. I don't know who of you would like to maybe, Commissioner?
I would remind what also Mr. Rasmussen have said, that we have the best worldwide services in space like Galileo, like Copernicus. Yes. So we have better services in that field than Americans or somebody else have. So it means that technologically we can build really very good services in space. Well, as I said, maybe we lost competition, in launching, but we are catching up. For time being, we do not have any kind of analog to Starlink, but we are building IRIS Square. And some experts are saying that it will be better than Starlink. So we are not believing that we can be good. We are good, and we can be even better. So that's my point. And that is what we shall continue. Of course, again, we need to see what I'm worried about, that when I'm listening, for example, that, India will have space station in 2030s. That they will they will have the astronauts landing on the moon in 2040s. I see some kind of ambition, very publicly announced, and that well, it shows where the country is moving ahead. In some way, I am worried that we are not publicly formulating our big ambitions in space till now. That is what I would be very happy really to engage with member states. Very important European Space Agency Council is coming later in this autumn. We are working together with them, and really in trying to bring some kind of more clear vision where we need to move during next decades in order really not to stay in those global developments behind all the competition, which is going on and which is very, 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 very much needed for developments in space in general.
So, Joachim, we have the technological background to be the most innovating continent in this field. So, in your opinion, why aren't we?
Well, I think much of it has been said today. We need to increase our competitiveness, which means that we need common rules across Europe. We need to build common European standards, and we need to invest heavily in technology development. But it's not easy. I mean, look at the defense of Denmark. The most crucial task Denmark has is to understand what is going on in Danish geography. The earlier we can discover the threat, the earlier we can respond. So we have an imminent need to have situational awareness. We have all the companies in Denmark being able to build the satellites, being able to harness the information. We have all the payloads. We even have a company that can launch nanosatellites. And still we don't have a space ambition, a space program in order to really create the fundamentals for our security. I see that as a lack of ambition, and I do believe we need to move in that direction. I'm not agitating for Denmark to do everything by its own, but basic security, understanding what's going on in our own geography is fundamental. So that's a good place to start. And of course, we need to look at the Nordics, at the Europeans, and where we as a nation can tie in. But I do believe that there are some fundamental things that we need to handle first.
Minister?
Well, okay, so now there's maybe for the first time a little bit of disagreement here. I share what you say, that Europe, we are, both Denmark and Europe, we are not exactly where we should be. But that we don't have set out a strategic plan or strategic ambition of where we want to be. I don't think that is true. I think the Commission has set out a very visionary and ambitious plan for space activities in Europe. Our Commission has, 5-doubled the budget for defense and space under your portfolio. Then, of course, that would be a matter of negotiation, also at the council level. But I think and in Denmark we have done the same. Other member states are doing the same. So I think the ambitions are there. My experience also from talking to my different European colleagues is that the analysis that we need to really step up, invest more, run faster in Europe is shared by everyone. So now what we do is to invest and run. I mean, and that's what we are starting to do. When it comes to the competition with not the United States, but with Starlink and with SpaceX, I think for Danish businesses or European businesses, for example, I think it's totally unproblematic to have partnerships with them or work together with SpaceX. I think that's unproblematic. What we don't want is to depend on them. And that is not a good position to be in. For Europe or for Denmark or for any other country, a country cannot be depending on a foreign company. So that is a dependency that we need to get away from, which is why the understanding that we need to work together as a unified player in Europe is so important. And for example, investing in common infrastructure is so important. I think that's one of the things that will actually get us there, where we can become less dependent on, for example, Starlink, having our own free European access to space, sending out our own satellites at conditions that are defined by us, at a price that is also fair to European companies. I think that is one very important step that we are taking together.
Commissioner?
Well, I agree with the Minister. Sometimes we need to look into, what kind of services which we need, we should develop by our own, efforts, or we should develop as European projects. And when we are starting to invest into our own, national capabilities, we can spend, big amounts of money on the services where, things will start to overlap. If Denmark is building, the same capacities of, for example, Earth observation governmental service for intelligence data, geointelligence data, and Sweden is building the same. And you are overlapping, and second, you need to build now what is with this Earth observation governmental service, what we want to have. We have very good Earth observation system, Copernicus. It's really best class. But if you want to have, precise picture of the same spot, Copernicus will give you, that picture once a day. What is now, in so-called Earth observation governmental service or intelligence data, what is happening with new technologies, that, you need to have possibility to see the same spot each 30 minutes. So you need to have quite a dense network of satellites in space in order really to see what is this geographical surveillance. In order to see that picture quite often, and that is especially for military needs is needed, and that is why for you to build a single Danish capacity would be really not very rational. That is why, okay, we can say maybe we're a little bit late, as always in Europe. We needed maybe that capacity to have now or several years ago, but we're building that capacity for the whole of Europe. And that is the most effective way how we can have all Europeans, we can have really good quality, high technological development of the same service, not building our own services in each country, especially which is maybe not the biggest among European member states. Big European member states, they are building those capacities, but for everybody else, that's not the best solution.
So lots of work ahead. There's something about creating a better competitiveness. There's more science to be discussed. There's more framework within the EU to be talked about. How do you, Minister, see Denmark sort of influencing the decisions that are being made at political level? What is our contribution to all the decisions that will be made at the European level?
Well, being a small but strong country, we have what it takes to be sort of a smooth operator. So that's what we're trying to be. Of course, now, as we have the presidency of the EU Council, we are currently conducting the negotiations on, for example, the EU Space Act with the member states. We're also doing it in the scientific area as such for the next framework program for European research, which is Horizon Europe. So I think we do play, others will judge if we play a positive role, but we do as good as we can to make sure that all European member states share the same both analysis, that we need a strategic approach to critical technologies as such, being it space, being it quantum technologies, being it AI, other critical areas that are so important both to our safety but also to our competitiveness. And what I spend a lot of time, discussing with my European colleagues about is how we need to really change the mindset in our own heads, understanding that if we want to succeed in a global competition, we need to have a real common market. We need to be a unified continent. I think that mindset and that shift in mindset, it's easy to say, it's so difficult to do, but I think that is, as I see it, the most important thing and the most, is the best success that we can achieve, being, as Denmark, is to convince as many actors as possible that now is really a time for Europe to stand together, to invest together, and to also, for example, when it comes to infrastructure, to actually share it together. If we succeed in strengthening our European access to space, that we actually make it accessible for all member states and for all companies and scientists across Europe, so that we can create a value for European citizens, for European companies, for European scientists, understanding the value of standing together. I think that in the global situation in which we are is the most important thing that we can do, having for these 6 months the presidency of the EU Council.
Minister, Commissioner, and Mr. Finkelman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you all of you for, yes, I'll just give some closing remarks. Thank you all of you for your excellent questions. I took as many of them as we had time for. It is now time for a coffee break. It takes place at the upper lobby, same place where you had lunch. Before you go, I have some very practical notes. So all sessions from this stage, including the student Q&A taking place at 3, will be streamed on the EU Commission YouTube channel for Defence and Space, and also on this conference's website. You can also watch it all when you come home. I need to remind you that during the break there will be a presentation up at the entrance of the Bifrost satellite that the Commissioner talked about. Cooperation, Danish-Swedish cooperation, has to do with surveillance of the Arctic. At 3 o'clock, the afternoon breakout sessions and the Q&A with students begin, so please be ready in the conference rooms. I will see some of you back here at 3. For the rest of you, thank you so much for your attention. See you later.